Hi, it's Ros and Steve here for week 3 of Cromwellathon. Read another chunk of Wolf Hall, and one of the comments I had last week was that we should have had more of Steve in that video. So I hope we're going to get a bit more of Steve this time. He says it's not his natural thing, and I understand that. I'm only starting getting used to it myself. So we've both read some more, another chunk of Wolf Hall, and I think we're both really enjoying the experience of rereading it.
Absolutely.
And I don't often reread things, so it's really interesting for me to reread it. Are you much of a rereader?
I used to be a rereader, but since we've been together, it's just ploughing forward onward to the next book, time after time after time.
Is that my fault?
Just leaving them in my wake.
You now read a lot more books than you did a few years ago, don't you? You read even more than I do now, don't you?
Well, last year I did, but yes,
similar. I
read a lot of poetry, so that sort of
it bumps it up, doesn't it? Because they're short.
Bumps up the numbers.
Yeah. So one of the things that we were talking about earlier in the week, as we were both reading it, was about the character of Henry and how he functions in the plot, as it were. And I'll hand over to you.
Well, it strikes me somewhat, particularly having read a lot of books based around the Greek myths, and that Henry, to some extent, performs a function of a capricious god, in that he is all powerful but acts seemingly on a whim,
Yes.
and every now and then just reminds the lesser mortals around him that he can actually destroy people as he sees fit, but by and large seems to be occupied by what's in front of him a lot of the time.
Yeah, they kind of have to dance around him, don't they?
They do,
and they're never quite sure what they can get away with or not, or what he might suddenly quite randomly do that will have kind of devastating impact on people, and it's sort of he might sort of, he just gets bored of something, or and moves on to the next thing, or it's just all about him and his wants and needs. Having said that, we do in this chunk see him sometimes as a bit more vulnerable, or
well, Mantel portrays him as becoming fixated or obsessed with Anne, doesn't he? So that becomes for him an overriding driver, I guess, into what he wants this, and he wants her, and he will do almost anything at this stage to achieve that, or to get that goal.
But at times he does then sort of express like remorse even, or regret, like there's a bit of a kind of logical bit of him that is thinking Wolsey was really effective, and I could trust Wolsey, and I've thrown him away, so he kind of and is he I guess I'm not sure whether he's telling people what he thinks they'll like to hear, or he's swayed by the person that he's with at that moment, or whether it's a kind of genuine sense of sadness. I don't know. It's he's just a really interesting character, isn't he?
He is, but he has a fairly limited role in the books, I think.
As you say, a bit like the gods in a Greek drama or something, that he sort of comes in and yes, he's sort of almost above the action a lot of the time.
And you get strange alliances forming, trying to anticipate or get what they want from
him, from the circumstances around him. And it's interesting that, like, because Cromwell does that, doesn't he? And you're not quite sure how much control he has in that. Do you know what I mean?
I do, yeah. I mean, Cromwell, to a certain extent, he's an opportunist, isn't he? You're not sure whether this is all part of a cunning plan that he has, that he can see coming to fruition. Yeah. I mean, quite clearly he's storing up grievances and things to be settled later on.
Yes.
But whether he truly believes he's going to have the opportunity to do that, I think is... he is as much at the whim of the capricious gods as anybody else in this, but he seems to have a bigger overview or a longer overview.
Perhaps just because of the capacity of his mind. There's an interesting scene when there's this thing where I didn't pick up on the first time I read it, where he's working out to what extent he can get away with pushing the king or manipulating him, and specifically touching him. And there's a thing about a hunting accident, and he realises from that you are allowed to touch the king
if he's in immediate danger.
But then there's the scene where Henry's had the bad dream, and he takes him by the arm, and that's almost like lèse majesty. It was quite a risky strategy to literally put his hand on Henry. And he pulls it off, and that really brings Henry round to relying on Cromwell, and So but it's like tightrope walking.
I think so. I think at that point Henry probably has two paths. He can sort of go the unhand me, I am your king route, or this is someone I can trust with my night terrors, and I think that Cromwell has assessed at that stage that's a gamble that's likely to pay off for him.
Yes, it's almost like Henry needs someone that he thinks he can rely on, because he thought he could rely on Wolsey, and then was persuaded that Wolsey let him down, and so he's looking for someone else to kind of hang his insecurities on, I suppose.
Yeah, he was looking for people he can trust. I think.
I know, because it's very difficult to identify who you can trust, because obviously everyone's out to get what they can from you if you're the king.
I think one of the other things in this segment of the book is the story about the Cornwall mob that have come up.
Yes.
So, and I think that reminds you that Henry's grasp of the Tudor family's grasp on power is quite tenuous to some extent.
Relatively recent, and
relatively
not
recent.
that secure.
Yes, his father had to put down pretenders to the throne and various things like that. So yes, he has a degree of insecurity, and he's looking to shore up that his power.
Yes, it's not a foregone conclusion, is it? And the worries about having a kind of a nice, safe male heir were. Those were legitimate worries, and it was interesting when Cromwell kind of like suggests, why not Mary, that was interesting. He's quite kind of as part of the humanising of Cromwell, isn't it, that he's shown as being quite sort of gentle and caring to Mary, isn't he?
And indeed to a lot of other people who are in his who are on his side, his team.
His team.
He makes people feel part of
his team. No, that's true. The other thing that I wanted to mention today that has been striking me over the first three sections that we've read is the River Thames in the book. How central the river is to the story, and we keep coming back to scenes on the river or riverside, and it's like it seems to have lots of different meanings. There's kind of like this practical one that it was the most efficient thoroughfare through London at that time.
That part of the country.
Things went back and forth on the river, and people went back and forth on the river. But there's also this thing about being having these little boat journeys, giving you little bits of relatively private time with people. So like conversation he has with Gardner on a boat, and there's a kind of an imposed intimacy of being on a small boat on the water. It gives Mantel the opportunity to do some lovely description.
It does,
of dawn and scenes in the dark.
Yes, it becomes very sort of real. You can almost sort of see that happening.
Feel it, smell it.
I think also the river for Cromwell has a more symbolic meaning, because obviously it links to his childhood, and he has a lot of memories about going down to the Thames with the other apprentices and things like that.
Yes.
But it's also about escape, about freedom, about being open to the continent and ideas that are out there.
Yes.
And that sort of flow, the idea of flow, of things moving through, I think that's the importance of the river to him. To some extent.
There was one scene on the river that made me notice something, which was the scene where he's, now I'm trying to remember where he's coming back from, but he and his sort of young apprentices, young relatives like Rafe and so on, And Cromwell has this conversation with the boatman, and is finding out he likes to keep in touch with what people are thinking about the situation, about the king or so. So he has this kind of quite frank conversation with this boatman.
About the passing boatman, yes. Yeah, so he wasn't on the...
Sion, or well, yeah. So, and it's at the end of it, he sort of says that, of course, that none of the other people in the boat could understand it because they were talking the sort of patois of the river, and that's like another language. Now, Mantel writes that just in kind of like straight English. She doesn't sort of attempt to sort of create
Tudor river boatman's patois,
or whatever. She just and that made me realise that actually frequently in the course of the book, Cromwell switches languages. And he's talking to people in Latin, or he's talking in French, or he's talking in English.
When he speaks to Anne, they speak in French.
Exactly.
We asked her, do you want to speak in English or do you want to speak in French?
And when he's at Moore's house, he's speaking Latin. And when he catches, I've forgotten which character it is, who's talking about him, and he overhears, and he was talking like Flemish or something, and thought that
it's the musician, isn't it?
Yeah, the musician, exactly. So, and what that reminded me was that although it's not a first-person narrative, we are always basically in Cromwell's head, aren't we? So she doesn't. Because he's fluent in all those languages, they're all just presented
as his thoughts.
Or we just read them in standard English because it's all that he just naturally switches from one to the other completely comfortably. So I think so. That's this whole book, the whole story. We never, I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, we never really see Cromwell from other people's perspective. We're always seeing him from and seeing everything from inside his head, even though it's not a first-person narrative.
I can't remember. I haven't really thought about it.
Well, now when you read the next bit, I'm going to be thinking about that and questioning that. So, looking forward to the next chunk.